for what we refer to, ladies and gentlemen, the good news, the bad news, and the other shit. I don't believe you heard me. Put down a bump and bump. Down a bump. But the good news, the bad news, and the other shit. Ladies and gentlemen, it's political. No, it's not political. It's conspiracy. It's conspiracy. Damn it.
Isn't that politics, man?
It is. Conspiracy. Well, there's a lot of stuff. I don't know if you guys first heard that the hacktivists, they call them hacktivists because they're hacking into things. They are a politically active radical group collective, anonymous, and they're taking credit for Sunday's infiltration of mybart.org. That's the website that belongs to San Francisco's Bay Area Rapid Transit System. They've been on the attack of BART, you guys. This goes all the way back to, you know, the problems they've had in the BART system with shootings. They really is the security. Right. The security at the BART. And people have died. Residents were planning, even this time, to protest this recent shooting on BART, the July 3rd, Victor. It was a July 3rd shooting of a man that was shot and killed by BART police after he allegedly threw a knife at the officers. Wow. So about 100 people gathered to protest the station action. But they've been attacking, so they've attacked the website, shutting it down. Man. That's amazing. And as many as 100 protesters got in there, took over the public spot, and shut it down. Wish I had some videos for you guys.
Now, let me ask you something. They're anonymous, right?
That's the name of the group. The name of the group is Anonymous. Right. They're really a group of hackers who do everything from defending the WikiLeaks. Right. And their claim to fame is they're not afraid to take on big companies, hacking into credit cards, you know, attempting to punish them, for example, for things like cutting off your ability to donate to WikiLeaks.
How long do you think they will remain anonymous?
Hell, for all I know, they're CIA. You know, you have to be careful. You know, our government has a history of starting stuff like that. That's right. And then come back and say, who's in it? And, you know, and then you find out they're part of the whole damn thing. They was running their thing. Believe it or not, right. Did you just hear how they sold weapons to the enemies just to prove that they could? Yes. All right, now I'm telling you, there's some crazy logic that goes down out there. Yeah, you know,
people with the weaponry that they bring that actually we gave to them. So they're shooting back at us in a war we're fighting with. We'll help you first, and then we'll fight later. You know, it just seems it's hard to believe that these guys will be anonymous for and how long. I just don't.
Well, because they're certainly, you know, the intelligence agencies are after them. So they certainly are going after them full bore, whether they're anonymous or not. We're gonna get you something, but you know, but that's what's happening. Well, it's a signal, it's a sign of the unrest, you guys, and that's part of Conspiracy Wednesday. You know, we deal with a lot of the conspiracies, and the president is the height of them. We talked yesterday about how some reports are out that people made money off of the U.S. Credit rating, you know, being reduced. That there are people who made a bunch of money. And so the people are basically not trusting him the same. But on the other hand, he still leads what appears to be a relative lacking group of Republican would-be candidates. You know, even though I said before, and some of my friends, you know, Elena, some of my other friends who write to me, they support the president. They feel that he's certainly better than what they've been previously exposed to, and they continue to express that. And then that's the way a lot of people feel. So that's what we wanted to raise today is how do you all feel? The president's rating is at an all-time low. But, you know, this happens to other presidents also. Right. A lot of it has to do with the fact that people who are struggling are starting to feel, Victor, that the president is not their advocate. When it comes to money, see, that's the main one that's hurting them right now. Everybody's hurting money, and they don't see the president as doing anything to improve their plight.
Now, I asked you a question, but you want to show a piece first, and I can come back?
No, go on with your...
Well, the question was, you know, we talked about this before. I said, okay, the all-time rating, well, let's just say he's at an approval low, which usually happens when there's transition.
And they all go through that. They'll go through that.
Remember I asked you the question the other day. I said we're around, 10% nationwide on average unemployment, or somewhere floating around 9%. Something.
That's what they're quoting.
That's what they're quoting. And I said,
Even though places like California, and depending on the population, is up to 16, they're saying up to 24%
right.
in certain parts of the black community.
Right. When it averages out, we do know this. And
Right.
even when it's down at 5 or 6%,
Right.
it may still be 14 or 15%. So then let me just give you the relative on this. When it's other folks and it's a certain percentage, it doesn't matter if it's other folks and it's a different percentage.
That's
so
right.
when we're at 5% unemployment, everybody go, well, we're cool now, we're happy. I said, but what about that particular group?
Right, they were still suffering at 5.
12 and 14 says, well, no. The difference is when we're at 5% unemployment, it's not a problem. It's when you get those extra 3 to 4 points that it becomes a problem. So, well, why is that? I thought unemployment, endemic to those who are suffering and impoverished, where's the percentage where all of a sudden it says, well, it's okay for a certain percentage of you guys to stay poor?
Well, they don't say it like that, but that's what's implied. And that's what's going on right now because you've had a huge effect on America's middle class. And how about the veterans? It's estimated that 1 out of 4
Right.
veterans returning are going to be homeless.
Yeah. Oh.
Actually, in L.A., they're saying right now that veterans make up about 25% of the homeless in L.A. right now, too.
Right.
So there's a correlation between serving in our U.S. military
Right.
and being homeless.
And
There's a correlation.
And let me ask you this: is this something that's kind of repeatable? That we find that during what they say post-war, that when our armed services, when they come home, are they more uplifted economically, or is it just historically that we're at a point that's unique, other than any other time, whether it's Vietnam War,
No.
Korean, World War II?
No, veterans have suffered historically when they come home.
Yeah, that's what I was.
From and really today you might argue it's better services than they ever had,
Right.
which shows you how bad they were.
Right.
Especially when you think of things like psychiatric care, where they, traditionally for those of you out there who have health care, none of you have good psychiatric care because I don't even think it exists in the United States of America. By that I mean a health plan that pays for it. You can get the care.
Right.
But you're going to run out of benefits.
Yeah.
And what happens is a lot of these things, they give you, 60 visits. Well, a lot of those diseases don't get better
No.
in those periods of time.
And insurance is written and it changes. What is written for you, you better stay up with the times because it always evolves at a cost and a definition. And I know that I'm kind of being all over the place on this, but it's like the Persian Gulf Syndrome. Do you still know what that is and what caused that? I mean, I understand that it exists, but was it confirmed as it relates to paying out for medical services for the armed services victims? Because there were victims.
Hence the conspiracy, like Agent Orange, and the fact that people in combat do suffer.
Right.
And they suffer in ways that go on. Yeah. Well, again, the issue is how much do we support the president? A lot of folks still supporting him. Dawn in the chat room, still, she says the president is an advocate. Not an advocate.
Right.
He's not an advocate.
Right.
But she says it's up to the individual to get more involved. People are getting more involved. Now, this is the part where I question people lately. How about the Tea Party? A lot of people get pissed off. I know Danny hates the Tea Party. But when you think of it, Vic, they've been one of the few citizen active groups that have challenged the government. Right. The part that I kind of agree with them on is on some of the things they've challenged.
Right.
Even though we don't share a lot of other political
right.
aspirations. That may be one.
I just have one concern, and I know it's always moving forward. I said you guys do what they call a great tap dance as if this is something new. You don't put the historical perspective across the presidents prior to the current one to show the relative scenario that repeats itself so people can get an idea of how the system works. But everything is ushered in as, oh my God, what's different? I mean, Bush had a terrible low rating before
That's right.
Obama came in.
That's right.
I said, go look back and see what repeats itself. And once they appease you to a certain degree, they go back to spending money.
Well, that's why my thing is that the president is no change.
Right.
I don't think I don't think people say, well, is he worse than Bush? No, I just think he's not that different.
Right.
I think he's different in some of the verbiage.
Right.
But when you look at the actual act, he's continuing all the wars.
Right.
His full cabinet is full of the same Wall Street people who were there that orchestrated the collapse.
Right.
He's got the same folks right there, the same money folks.
Right.
And so that's the question. Let's take a look at this piece from Russian television that talks about the effect of America's middle class. And we don't have to ask you. We know you're struggling. Our friends are struggling. Yeah. Shit, we're struggling. Cutting down, eating out so much, where you go, all of that.
Many Americans who wind up living on the streets never thought their economic prosperity would eventually become economic ruin.
Before I moved here, I had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I had 2 cars and a truck, a big backyard, big front yard, a dog in the front, a dog in the back.
Kevin Payton describes his financial stability when he was working as an electrician in Louisiana. After being laid off, he headed west to San Diego in search for work. But Payton has been unable to land a job in this expensive city, and within months ended up on the street begging for change.
They saying I'm overqualified. What that means, I do have no earthly idea. But they saying I'm overqualified, and I don't understand that. A job is a job.
Payton is not alone when it comes to formerly middle-class Americans unable to find work and ending up on the street.
I used to be a nurse assistant for convalescent hospital for the elderly.
Out of shame, Nina doesn't want to show her face on camera. She's so embarrassed about her financial situation, she hasn't come clean to her relatives about how bad things have gotten. She now sleeps on a mattress on the street corner. It's a rough life, made even tougher as police enforce measures to push homeless people out of certain neighborhoods. While there are signs for vacant luxury condos, right next door, you can see the belongings of hundreds and thousands of homeless people who will not have a bed to sleep in tonight.
There are people all over the city in cars.
With more people finding high rents or mortgage payments impossible to pay, sleeping in a car or motorhome has become a widespread last resort.
They told me not to sleep in inside my car or my motorhome. I will go to jail for that.
Angel, who is also ashamed to show his
Ain't
face,
that something to
has been
police?
threatened by police for living in his pickup truck. In Venice, California, others have been arrested or ticketed for doing just that.
And we live in a city where people are one paycheck away from being homeless. And if you go down on Skid Row, that's what you see. People lost an apartment, they wound up there, and it becomes a cycle you can't get out of.
Those trying to help the homeless sometimes are targeted by police as well. This video shows activists being arrested for handing out food to transients in Orlando, Florida, one of several American cities where feeding the homeless is outlawed.
Can you imagine that?
Most people
I can't
are
go,
one or two paychecks
I can't go down there and
away from
feed
losing
them.
their housing, and that's just the truth.
Nationwide, the official unemployment rate is doggedly stuck at over 9%. Many economists, however, claim the real figure is twice that, with many no longer bothering to look for jobs. A record 45 million people are now on food stamps, while food pantries struggle to keep up with demand. And if it weren't for these services, who knows how many people might be on the streets.
The government don't care about nothing. You know, what make them richer and richer, make us poor and poorer.
As the government struggles to get its own financial house in order, little thought seems to be given to the housing of Americans across the country, leading many to wonder if scenes like these might be the new normal for America.
Look at that, you guys. Look at the tents.
In Los Angeles, Ramon Galindo, RT.
Well, you know, see, this gets to be what is our role, you guys. And you know, as much as I have friends who disagree with me, the one thing that's constant is you know that we're arguing this fight for you. That's why we're so angry. You know, I wish I could drive through L.A. and not be affected by the people I see, but it just messes with me. I'm sorry. It messes with me. I got to the habit now where I keep some ones kind of balled up over here in the car so that I always have like a one or something to hand out the window to somebody, because I got that from my buddy who always used to keep money in his car to give the homeless people. He said that was his way of doing charity. It was way more direct. He said he didn't like to give in to all the stuff. He said, I just see him on the street and give him $2 or $3. And that's the way I do my goodwill, Mario. I do it personal up front. But that's what, you know, it's not that these people don't want to work. These are not, they just get caught up in the whirlwind, so many of them, and they're caught up and they give up because they're overwhelmed. We see the people. We have a show that we promote here at Pack Stereo Network called Homeless Not Helpless. And it's done by Rodney Porter, our ambassador, All Things Possible, who's out there homeless. And we provide him with a little flip camera, and he shoots episodes. But it's amazing with all this wealth and all this going on that we still have this situation. So we wanted to bring that to you as a reminder, not so much to mess up your day, but because we feel it's our responsibility to champion certain things.
Right.
And it's our responsibility as this neo-urban internet television to remind people of all the crap that's going out there, that we can't forget them. But most of you don't. I know you all have family members struggling right now. How many of you, some of your money is going to help out your children or your grandchildren or your uncles, your aunts? How many people are having to live with them?
Right.
You know, that's what I'm saying. So I know you all are knowing it too. It's just that maybe I'm just a little more pissed off about it.
And look, I'm not saying that our people shouldn't get more focused. I'm just saying when we were in Happyville, what I call it a healthy economy, sometimes we get lazy.
No,
And lazy, I'm not saying they
Right.
work hard, but people, yeah, I'm do this real quick. It's like yesterday, real quick, I talked to somebody that said, you have a cush job. You know what I'm talking about, Mario.
Yeah,
I said, you have
yeah.
a cush job. I said, you really are not really working that hard. You think you're working hard. And I said, when you work hard, it's the idea that you actually have the choice to not work hard one day to the next. And they complain about how hard you worked last Monday or next Friday coming up. I said, you really don't understand what working hard is. Now, and she got impacted by this amount and volume of work, and it wore her out. I said, do you appreciate what you have? That you were, Isn't it good to be tired of working hard? Than tired of looking for a job, man. I'm serious. So, you know.
Well, we're acknowledging that. I mean, just a rough day. Just a rough day. So, well, let's get on to the next thing. Now, we've been hearing all this stuff about the Iowa straw poll. Everybody's like, what the hell is that? Well, first of all, I too, get tired of these things. I said, let me go read up and find out what all this stuff is, because you sort of have an idea, but you forget. Well, as it turns out, Iowa is among the first stops for the presidential primaries. Right. The president has pretty much indicated they're out to raise $1 billion for the presidential reelection. And they said that they expect a Republican candidate to raise well over $500 million.
That's called.
So this is what it takes to be president. Look at the kinds of money.
Big time, man.
Well, so people are spending money, and this is the beginning of the presidential primaries. And for Republicans, they say that the first stop is always Iowa, and it's the Iowa straw poll. It's described as like, where's this line? I thought it was funny. Like county fair, popularity contest meets county fair. Because people come out, I guess they get fried Twinkies. I watch the Food Network, So I'm sure they show up, and have the fried Twinkies and all that, and they get to hear some speeches. And so it's a big deal. As it turns out this year, right, Michelle Bachmann, a wizard of intelligence, came in number one. But, let's see what actually is behind this thing that is known as Iowa. Iowa's the straw poll. Iowa, the kingmaker.
I can't wait to see this, man. The kingmaker?
That's what they say. Iowa.
It is the place where thick stalks of corn blanket the landscape, simultaneously standing proud and swaying with the wind. Where city centers resemble a different time. And those who live here say they are the true embodiment of Main Street in America.
You are an Iowa. We're going to get you moving over that way.
Need your ticket and your Iowa driver's license.
Iowa people are generally very welcoming and open, I think. Yeah, they're very practical people.
It turns out that they are also very powerful people.
We get a first-hand look at all the candidates. They come to our cities, they come to our area. We get to sit down, town meetings with them, ask them questions, find out what their real core values are, which is very, very important to Iowa.
The Iowa caucuses is among the first stops in the presidential primary. But for Republicans, the initial hurdle is always the Iowa straw poll.
Well, you could say it's popularity contest meets
Just like a county fair.
But don't let this carnival-like atmosphere fool you. What is happening right now can and has carried significant weight. It can determine who sinks and whose campaign carries on. It's a prime example of small-town politics.
Not a whole lot of brothers out there, huh?
If you're ready to vote, line up here!
I've lived here for 2 years, and I see a lot. Never felt more energy and interest in politics than living here, actually.
There you go. Take two. You give one to a friend. I will. Okay?
They call it retail politics out here, where you'll be able to talk to the candidates. And I think that's good.
Good for Iowa, for sure.
I got to shake Michelle Bachmann's hand. How crazy is that?
But out of 50 states, Iowa's population ranks 30th at a mere 3 million people.
If you have not registered,
More than that,
please do
wasn't
so now.
More than 91% of those who do live here are white.
Homegrown Iowa.
Oh, I didn't notice that, see?
And its economy is primarily agricultural.
Buttering them all up and then put them on a grill.
Oh, that
Candidates
looks good.
nevertheless spend considerable time
What's some of
and
that
money
grilled corn?
in the state. In hopes of proving to the party and the country that they are organized and should be taken seriously.
On behalf of over 600,000 Iowa Republicans,
As for this year,
the winner of the 2011 Iowa straw poll is Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann.
in second place by... In 1999, George W. Bush won the Iowa straw poll. And while he is the only one that's gone on to win the presidency
But
so
she's no
far,
threat.
Iowa voters treat voting as a duty.
The people of Iowa are pretty good at seeing through what's sometimes a little glitter and a little bit shiny, and they find the substance and the basics that are basically here in the candidates.
Being from the Midwest, a lot of times people associate us with what's really the best about America, and I think that when we vote, people take it seriously.
But for those on the outside, it can also be a perplexing reality that in a land where corn is king, its people are in some ways viewed as kingmakers. In Ames, Iowa, Christine Frizzau, RT.
Well, I think they should make Compton the center of political activity. Let's get out there in Compton.
Now, Mario, here's the thing. Let's just say this. You have to have a synergy point. You have to have a place to start. So let's just say it's not Iowa. If you had a second choice with the information at hand that you know, because you know you're trying to they're representing what they call the general population of the country. And do we lean towards Iowa because they're more conservative?
No, they pick Iowa because it's a place that's known to be friendly. In other words, each party is going to try to start in a place that gives them the best spin, the best media coverage. So Iowa, Republican, right. So they go there and because that's the place to start, and maybe because they respond to that shaking. In other words, one could argue if you're really going to respond to the shaking hands and all that, maybe that's not the criteria either.
Okay, I'm gonna put you on the spot here, and I'm just because that hand, because I know where you're going with this. If you pick a point where you can have influence, does that necessarily translate that they are really on the pulse of politics, or they're on the pulse of being able to impact with what you call shaking hands? If the value of what they're basically saying is, we can move people here to a starting point easier to affect me. Even though I haven't done anything, I'm just a candidate. Easier in Iowa than any other place, or more difficult? What do you think?
Well, they paint it as being more difficult, but I think it's easier. That's why they go there. They already have their support. In other words, you don't go there. They're not stupid.
Right.
They know that when they go there, like in other words, they say, let's go to where everybody's going to cheer you.
Right.
And they go there and they plan the rallies. You don't go where everybody's going to boo you because that's a bad op moment.
See, the reason why I said that is because, like you said, I'm going by your quote, you say that most people are sheep.
Well, they are sheep. Well, let's deal with the fact that the Republicans have no candidates worth mentioning. What's interesting, and I think, say you're a leftist, I really think people should take time to really consider the Republican dilemma as part of the conspiracy, because many conspiracy theorists say that it's not by accident that the people that are running against the president are so poor, and since that such bad candidates. Right. If you look at what's happened in Iowa, Michelle Bachmann was the leader, but second place was Ron Paul. Now, these are both two Republicans that the Republicans in general do not want leading any damn thing. First of all, even though Ron Paul is a conservative, his ideas are so outside the norm that he has a lot of support amongst the leftists because he actually wants to challenge government. Now, people are a little irritated with his son But remember, these are two. Michelle Bachmann being the Tea Party candidate. These are not people that the Republicans really want in any power. My theory being because the Republicans and the Democrats basically handle all the money the same. Right. They act like it's not the same, but as you notice, they come to agree. We say traditionally they agree on 90% of the budget. And that the dog and pony show is usually over 10% of the budget. So we don't think there's that much different. That's why I pay particular attention to the Tea Party candidates and people like Ron Paul, because I like to see the Republicans struggle with these groups who they don't want to represent them, but who are gaining so much power. So much power, in fact, that in Russia television, they were talking about how in the U.S. there's a media blackout on Ron Paul because the GOP supporters and the GOP power brokers don't want this man to win. Now, whether you're leftists or rightists, you might want to take a look at this piece on Ron Paul and think to yourself, why would the U.S. media be blacking out someone like Ron Paul? Interesting. Because you can watch the other side.
I am back from Ames, Iowa, where I covered last week's GOP debate, as well as the Iowa straw poll. Got to spend some quality time in Middle America, and also got a front row seat to some of the early campaigning that's going on for the Republican primary. And I've got to make some observations about what it looks like on the ground there, especially when it comes to a certain candidate. The night of the debate, standing on a bridge overlooking the road where the candidates and the media come in, a large group of Ron Paul supporters. I ran into a couple college kids who said they had very little money but drove in from Missouri to show their support. I also met a family who drove from Vegas for the same reason, Ron Paul. And if you watched the debate and heard the cheers in the audience, you'd understand he has a following. And many of them were pleasantly surprised to see that Ron Paul was asked a lot of questions by the mediators of the Fox-sponsored debate. So I thought,
he does at least attempt to answer questions.
Mainstream media is going to give him a fair shot.
Oh, yeah, he does.
Even tried to talk to Ron Paul about that afterwards.
Looks like they paid more attention to you this time around, don't you think?
Yeah, they're moving my way.
All right, so Ron Paul was not convinced. But I've got to say, the most astounding thing I saw was at the straw poll itself. This is the way it looked. Each of the candidates had, their campaign bus and maybe a tent, maybe a stage. But Ron Paul had an entire wing of Iowa State University.
Partridge Family.
Games and stages and multiple tents, which, yes, the Ron Paul camp spent more money on. You can see, I took some of these pictures that you're seeing behind me.
Let's go to
these
Iowa.
are people who were decked out in Ron Paul gear. And they needed the space that Ron Paul rented. They had busloads of supporters and tons of people, and they showed up and they voted. Out of the 16,892 votes
Take a look, everybody.
Ron Paul came in second place, losing to Michelle Bachmann by 150
These are your Republican candidates. Paletti already dropped out.
How mainstream media interpreted this.
Well, based on what we know today, the Republican nominee for the president is almost certainly going to be one of three candidates, Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry, or Mitt Romney.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
Guess what, Paul? If you get video of Sarah Palin or get a soundbite from her,
bring
that back to us. You can hold the Ron Paul stuff.
I have gotten a ton of email today from people saying, look, Ron Paul finished 152 votes behind Michelle Bachmann of the Ames straw poll, basically a dead heat. Why aren't we giving him his due?
Well, let me start with the second question because it's easier to remember. It was the latest one. Ron Paul is not going to be president of the United States. Libertarian is not going to be elected. We are not a libertarian country.
So what is the deal here? I mean, the people are voting.
Looks kind of selective to me.
Everything from gold to ending the wars to closing down the Federal Reserve are starting to be adopted by more mainstream Republicans. His ideas have remained consistent, and yet he is still, according to most people, unelectable. Well, luckily the Ron Paul camp is still full speed ahead. So I want to leave you with this, a snippet of Ron Paul's latest campaign ad.
Ron Paul, the one who will stop the spending, save the dollar, create jobs, bring peace, the one who will restore liberty. Ron Paul, the one who can beat Obama and restore America now.
You know, the reason why I cite this, you guys, is remember, I'm not a Republican by any means, but I love to watch both parties. This tells you something. It tells you a lot about the nature of the Republican Party. The whole Tea Party thing, they really don't know how to deal with it. They don't want it. They really want business as usual. That's part of the delight I take in the Tea Party, because it disrupts the business as usual, because I think the business as usual is corruption.
I would say when you're probably identified as a libertarian, you're going to go through what we call the Ross Perot effect. No matter how much you may be running or trying to run in the race, you're stealing votes. If you're taking vote from our party, that's not good. See, it's different.
Well, he is the party. See, the thing is, he is the.
He is, but what is he? What is this? Why are they identifying him as a libertarian?
Because of his viewpoints.
All right. So, is that more hurtful to the Republican base?
Well, yeah.
As one?
The whole thing is threatening. Just like I said, the fact that here's your Republican candidates, right, and the Republican primary. Right. So the top two you don't want, right, and the third one resigned, right, from the campaign. Yeah. So. Yeah, you guys are right. Obama is better than the Republican candidate, because there is no Republican candidate. There is none.
Right. Wait a minute.
There's this.
Wait a minute. If you're part of this base and everybody says, "My God, this is the best time to rush up and be somebody in the Republican base who has nobody, and no one they can mobilize themselves around," and you actually say, "Don't you see this as an opportunity?" I mean, if you were in that camp, that affiliation, you have the philosophy of the Republican base, wouldn't you say this is a window of opportunity for you?
Well, there you go. It's a window of opportunity for somebody.
Yeah, hey.
It may not be the window that some other folks want.
Right. Now, I'm not saying that things are not the same.
Right.
They are the same. You just call, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stay positive, Joe. I promise.
Well, it is Conspiracy Wednesday.
I'm going to stop.
You guys, you know I've been screaming and bawling and just throwing up over the whole BP oil spill thing. Pissed me off. It's now not, the popular news to talk about, but it's far from over. But here comes an article about a big oil spill, which people are saying is the most substantial oil spill in the last decade in the North Sea, involving Royal Dutch Shell. Wow. Here's one about the big oil spill, which they're saying the biggest of the decade, and the involvement of the UK government. Oh, yeah, not just us here with BP.
Royal Dutch Shell has admitted at least 216 tonnes of oil have leaked into the sea just off the coast of Scotland. The spill, which began 5 days ago, was only acknowledged by the oil giant 2 days later and is still ongoing. I'm now joined by Adam Ramsey. He's event manager of the People and Planet student organisation, for his view on what's behind the silence. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. Now, for 2 days, Shell refused to acknowledge there had been a spill, and only after 5 days did it give any details. Why do you think this lack of communication?
I think that people who are used to dealing with Shell wouldn't be surprised at all about the lack of communication. It's worth remembering that it was only a few days ago that they admitted, after years of lies and cover-up, their role in the enormous spills across Nigeria. This company has never let the truth, or in fact people's lives or the environment, get in the way of their profit margins.
Well, official estimates...
Certainly we shouldn't be surprised about that.
Yeah, OK, well, official estimates put the spill at 216 tonnes, 216 tonnes of oil over an area of, 100 square miles. And as you've just touched on, the tradition of actually underplaying spill sizes and not giving the full facts. Tell us, how do you perceive the situation? Just how serious is this oil spill?
I think the first thing to say is that we don't know yet. The only real information seems to be coming from Shell themselves, and as you say, they don't have a great history in being honest about these things, and certainly not in the short term. So I think we certainly don't know for sure how bad it is, but we do know that this is a serious spill. We know for certain that it's the worst spill in this country in more than a decade. We know that it's going to have serious impacts both on the environment across that area of the North Sea, with breeding season for birds.
Wow.
And we also know that, that local fishery communities up the northeast of Scotland are going to be really terrified tonight by the potential impacts on their industry. So we don't know for sure. And I think also, if you look at the broader context, it's surely got to have an impact on legislators as Shell seek to expand into the Arctic, as Shell and other oil companies are looking all around the world. If they can't even keep their sources of oil, their oil wells in the UK safe, then what does that say about their prospecting in some of the most dangerous seas in the world?
What I find very interesting is that we're talking about it now. We're saying that this actually occurred quite a few days ago. I've been looking at a lot of the websites concerning British news. Not much on there up until now. Just how much coverage are you seeing there in the UK media?
I've seen very little coverage of this at all, and I'm saddened to say that I'm not at all surprised how little coverage there's been of this oil spill. As I say, it's the biggest in 10 years, but it's important to remember that the UK and the Scottish government, who have a lot of remit over this, that both UK and the Scottish government have done everything they can to cover it up. People might have seen footage of the Scottish First Minister Alex Salmond telling everyone that Shell had this under control. The UK government's done very little to raise the profile of this, and again, that's not something we should be surprised by. The UK government and the Scottish government have both got long histories of being hand in hand and in the pockets of the oil industry in this country. And so, with the government, who are the only other potential monitors of this, doing everything they can to keep it quiet, and Shell particularly not talking about it, it's not surprising that the media aren't covering it. So again, not surprising, but very sad, as you say, a major incident really not reported in the UK press.
Okay, well, it's very interesting to hear what you have to say. Adam Ramsey, thanks very much indeed for joining us live there in the UK. Events manager at People and Planet. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
You know, conspiracy again. We talked about that. Again, this is another one of my criticisms of the president. You know, I did say that at the time. Remember, he told everybody to go down to Louisiana and it was all safe. Let's go vacation. Right. And I was the one who said, Mr. President, all due respect, it's never wise to tell people to go vacation at a toxic spill. Right. Yeah. Poor judgment, sir. Okay, take that one back. Okay, I wouldn't have my kids get in that water. I'd lasso one of my children if they was running toward that damn water. Don't you dare touch that damn water. I'm talking about let's go down there and vacation. Ain't that a bitch? All right. All right. So, you know, we had to say that because the oil companies get away with everything. Still getting away with everything. So, now for our last story of this good news, bad news, and other shit. We're dealing with this piece that came across about the ongoing Cuban embargo. You know, Vic, you mentioned this. He said, how long are we going to do this? Well, that's the question. How long?
You know, this is one of those things where you look back and generations. You know, the people of that particular generation, that time, they've all moved on. And what I mean by that, age and blessings and gifts and on to the higher place. I don't understand the benefit in this at all. The part that we're so slow on this and that. This is worse to me than us going through that Russian Cold War. Remember?
Right, right. Well,
it blows me away because I said, this is Cuba. What is the threat?
The threat is only listen. 2/3 of Americans favor ending the embargo. 2/3 favor normalizing relationship. You have 1% of the Hispanic population. Let me find that exactly. In the U.S., where is that? It was Cuban. Fewer than 1% of Americans are of Cuban origin. Excuse me, that's what it was. And the majorities immigrated before the end of the Cold War. Unlike the rest of the Hispanic population in the U.S., 58% of Cubans are U.S. citizens. But a lot of that has to do with our policies toward, so quote-unquote, refugees. One of the organizers of a very active political organization, America's Voice, said that part of the issue is that Cubans that arrive and set foot on the beaches in Florida are well on their way to citizenship. Haitians that arrive and set foot on the beaches of Florida are on their way to a detention center and deportation. So the ways they are handled are not the same. The Cubans that come here are not handled the same. And they're very active in the political process, and there's a very powerful anti-Castro lobby. And people have remarked they've been here so long, they know how to play the American game, and they play a very key role in the votes from a swing state like Florida. But let's take a look about Cuba and how Americans are feeling about the ongoing embargo. I want to go to Cuba.
Now, poll after poll in the US show that a growing number of Americans think it's high time to lift the embargo against Cuba. It's been in place for over half a century and was designed to bring down Fidel Castro, but it's Cuban citizens who suffer. But despite political promises from President Obama downwards, it seems the powerful anti-Castro lobby won't let the embargo drop anytime soon, as RT's Kayleen Ford investigates.
Cuba, 90 miles from America's shores and for 52 years, a world apart. Following the Cuban Revolution in 1959, the U.S. imposed an embargo on all trade, investment, and travel in an attempt to bring down the communist government of Fidel Castro. Some of the Cubans who fled the island for the U.S. pushed to keep this agenda alive, and so the anti-Castro lobby was born.
They give a lot of money. You know, U.S. elections are, in fact, privately financed, so they've been able to figure out how to play the game. So even though they're a small percentage of the population, they play very big in a key swing state.
Polls consistently show that two-thirds of Americans favor ending the embargo and normalizing relations with Cuba, and some in Congress agree.
It's about time we talk to Cuba and stop fighting these wars
There
that
he
are
is
about 30
again.
or 40 years old.
Anti-Castro groups have given more than $1.7 million in donations to federal candidates from 2004 to 2010, more than $500,000 in 2010 alone to both Republicans and Democrats, ensuring U.S.-Cuba policy remains virtually unchanged.
A strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba.
That it will enhance the effectiveness of the embargo.
The United States will keep the embargo in place.
Fewer than 1% of Americans are of Cuban origin, and the majority emigrated before the end of the Cold War. Unlike the rest of the Hispanic population in the U.S., 58% of Cubans are U.S. citizens.
Cubans who arrive and step foot on beaches in South Florida are on their way to citizenship. Haitians who arrive and set foot on the beaches of Miami are on their way to a detention center and deportation.
Cuban Americans are also a force to be reckoned with in Congress.
We definitely are the most overrepresented community in Congress.
With 2 senators and 4 representatives.
We say Zapata vive. Otto Ray, ¿cómo estás, mi amigo?
Including the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen.
I welcome the opportunity of having anyone assassinate Fidel Castro and any leader who is oppressing the people.
They have powerful political action committees behind them, like the U.S.-Cuba Democracy PAC, the #1 campaign donor in 2006 with more than $500,000.
Our community is very focused and it's very concentrated in Florida and New Jersey. Therefore, we really have to make an effort to get out there and create the relationships.
Do you lobby?
Essentially.
An agenda that has been known to change many politicians' minds, including President Barack Obama's.
I think it's time for us to end the embargo on Cuba.
Yet Obama changed his mind while campaigning before the Cuban American National Foundation.
As president, I'm not going to take off the embargo.
But while the majority of Americans favor ending the sanctions against Cuba, even protesting in the streets, they have yet to match the strength of the anti-Castro lobby. Kayleen Ford, RT, Washington, D.C.
Now, I got to make a comment on this whole issue of embargoes, because some people say, well, how do embargoes work and why embargo? The whole concept behind embargoes was to make things so bad for the people in a country that they rise up and overthrow the government. But look what you do. You make things bad for everybody in the whole country, torture the populace, as it were, to make them rise up against the government. So obviously you don't care anything about the people. We want to end this broadcast by acknowledging some of the things that people have been saying in the chat room, like Don, too. We want to encourage people to get out there and peacefully protest, get out there and participate in government. We don't need to see the hostilities right now because that's going to be excuse for the clampdown. But we do need to see a return to civil disobedience. Yeah. I think you have to come out and peacefully protest these things. And part of my concern, and I stated it early into the administration, I said, I sure hope I don't have to get out there and protest the first African-American president. But if we still are in those wars, I'll be damned if I don't protest you.
Yeah, well, you're going to have a problem here because of the plight of economics and the poor situation here. It's going to take a back seat because they're going to say, look, as bad as things are over there right now, it's far worse than the agendas at hand that we have over here. So it's kind of hard to go to their rescue. Now, that being said, I'm still saying, what is the purpose of standing with this embargo to prove what? Is this still about communism? And I still sit here.
That commie threat.
Please tell me. Okay, now it is about communism.
Well, to me, like I said, that was always, again, a bolstering up of the enemy to prepare for your defense spending.
Well, okay, I'm going to say this. The Cold War basically had a number of things that were underneath it, but it was based on a philosophy. Communism, capitalism, the whole thing. All right, got it. Isn't communism its own form of capitalism? I mean, it's about controlling money throughout power, right? To be able to institute what you want to control and dictate to people. Remember, we're a codependent nation. I'm not saying it's bad what we do. I love our system. I love the university system. I love the empowerment program. I love the things that we stand for. But we're a codependent nation. Come work for us. Don't go out and build your own. That's our philosophy. Now, I'm not questioning. Still one of the best that we have. But in the end, I say, okay, what is the bad thing about why we should keep Cuba surrounded with this plight of this people?
Exactly.
Under what? Communism? Is that it? Is that okay? All right, got it. That's the answer.
It's just an ongoing, like I said, it's an ongoing.
I don't get it. I don't get it, man. I'm stuck. I'm going to my political classes, you guys. Just want to let you know that I am going to take further education. Just want to let you get some answers.
Well, everybody, thank you. It's been Conspiracy Wednesday. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the good news, the bad news, and the other shit. Bum, bum, bum. That's right, the good news. Conspiracy Wednesday. Yeah. Peaceful protest, everybody. Peaceful protest. Get out there.